Oh, I'm Frank Horne. I used to be a motorman on the Burnaby Lake Central Park and worked even on the Chilliwack line, but I'd like to take you back down memory lane with me and watch this Central Park interurban coming out of the depot, Carroll Street Depot. Now that must be a Burnaby Lake, pardon me, with the Central Park's going to follow him right out. This film was made 40 years ago, and the commentary is made in 1990, 40 years later, so we're going to have to do a little bit of comparison here. That's the Burnaby Lake, just come over the viaduct on Hastings Street, over the Great Northern Railway tracks. Now he's cutting into the S-curve on Hastings Street. He's comes up to the switch at Clark Drive, which was an electric switch. The motorman had to take it pretty careful around there because the switch threw right in front of the car, and if he was going too fast, he would be headed up the wrong way. He's turning on to Clark Drive now. Now he's heading across Clark Drive towards Venables. Now he's coming up Venables, just about to Commercial Drive, where Little Italy is now. A real sharp curve around that onto Commercial Drive. Now there's a two-car Central Park train with the Burnaby Lake behind him. The Burnaby Lake will stop here at 6th Avenue, and the conductor's got to get out and throw the switch to take the crossover, and the Burnaby Lake line can start on his own right-of-way after leaving Commercial Drive. The conductor's got to go and register in the booth and call out the number of the meet that come in on the opposing train, which he passed somewhere on the city street. That's a little booth there where the conductor goes in to register. You'll notice the Central Park train going down Commercial Drive. A couple of the big Chilliwack cars going to show up here in a second. There they go. Now we're on our way. The Burnaby Lake line is on his own little right-of-way now. He's has to shoot back from 6th Avenue to almost 1st Avenue. There's several little street crossings here. One more short block and we're at Victoria Drive, where the tracks cross and go up the steep grade. That house you see there is still there with a brand new one built right on the right-of-way. Now he's climbing the hill up towards Lakeview. There was no station at Lakeview, just a platform at the top of the hill. That was a real steep grade, and then we used to have a 3-car train go up there in the rush hour every day, and boy, you could walk faster than you could climb the hill. Now we can see the powerhouse at Nanaimo Road there in the distance. And this is actually now the alley of 1st Avenue. Now we're veering across in the angle now. Well, he's coming up from Vancouver. They just reversed the scene here. He's coming from Vancouver now up to 1st Avenue, or up to Nanaimo Street at 1st Avenue. Now he veers over and goes down the center of 1st Avenue. If you drive along there today, you'll see there's grass all the way down the middle of the road, and that's where the interurban line was, right on the top of the grass. That's 1st Avenue the way it was 40 years ago, about 1950-51. That's Slocan Street Station. It wasn't. It was just a platform there. Oh, he's coming up to Renfrew Street. There's the station ahead at Renfrew. This was all single track here, and half the time the stations were on the wrong side, and the motorman couldn't, he had to guess it where the door was, but they got pretty slick at it after a while. Now he's going down the hill, down towards Windermere Station. Quite a steep hill. You had to really keep a hold of it, or you'd go whistling right by the station. Down the bottom there's a flat spot where the train will sit without any air on it. It's perfectly level for, about a couple 100 feet. And then the next one is BCER Station. You see the barricade on the road. That's as far as the road went. And in the springtime, the caterpillars would get in there, and man, you would go sliding down there right around the curve and have to back all the way up because of greasy caterpillars and stink. Ooh, when they got on cooking on the wheel, hot wheels. We come around the bend here now, and there's Horne substation. A shot coming from Vancouver to Boundary Road, coming into Horne Station. Just beyond Horne Station is where we have a sighting from he meets the fellow come from Sapperton. It's a one-end sighting. You have to pull in and back out. This is the fellow from Sapperton. He holds the main line. The fellow from Vancouver heads into the sighting. The little tracks on the side are just spur tracks going into the Horne substation where we took the transformers in. I worked on a freight engine one day, and we shoved a big heavy transformer in there. It was so heavy they had to build a spur through Dominion Bridge Company to get the transformer to us. Now we're heading now towards Gilmore Station, just about ready to go across the Lougheed Highway. That's the Lougheed Highway and the wigwag going. In a second, you should be able to see the spur they built through Dominion Bridge. There it is. That's the one they built just to bring that big heavy transformer in a big depressed low bed flat. Now that's Gilmore Avenue. He goes by Gilmore and takes a big sweeping curve and parallels the Great Northern Main Line right down to Queens Station, which is Willingdon now, Willingdon Avenue. Years and years ago it was called Queens Avenue. That's why Queens Station was still known as Queens. In the far distance is the old powerhouse, the old substation of Horne. That signal is the smashboard signal allowing the Burnaby Lake line to cross over the Great Northern. It's the automatic signals there, so that if there's a Great Northern coming, you have to wait for it until he clears. There, he just went across the Great Northern tracks. Across the flats now, over Still Creek to Murren Station, which was the foot of Royal Oak Avenue. There's the trestle over Still Creek. Murren Station just ahead. That's Murren. Now you'd be right along the side of the 401 freeway right here. This is Douglas Road. Now Douglas Road, the road goes over the top of the freeway. In the rush hour, we used to have 2 cars from here to Vancouver. They would cut one car off here at Douglas, and the brakeman would stay with it. The conductor and motorman would take the single car to their meet at Hill. and the fellow they met at Hill would couple onto the single car we left at Douglas Road, and they'd continue on to Vancouver with the brakeman. The brakeman and the one car would stay always at Douglas Road to Vancouver. That's Sprott Station. It's one of the interchanges on the 401 freeway is Sprott. Heading now towards Burnaby Lake Station, which was the old Sperling Avenue. Actually, Sperling Avenue is not cut through there anymore. There's a big Burnaby Fire Station there on Sperling, just off of Douglas Road. Here he comes around the bend, heading towards Sperling Avenue and Burnaby Lake Station. Oh, he didn't stop at Burnaby Lake. He said, boy, he's really wound up. He's going to go right around there to Rayside. That's a little trestle. That little creek that he just went over is the creek that drains Deer Lake into Burnaby Lake. And there's Rayside. There was a horse farm here. They used to rent riding horses, and they'd take the trail along the side of the tracks and ride almost around Burnaby Lake. The next station is Vorse. Pretty lonely country out there, but that's right. The freeway is almost on top of the interurban there now. Just past Vorse. There's the meet down there. You'll see him in the shadows. That's the meet, and he'll go to Vancouver, and that's Hill Station. We're carrying on to Sapperton. Cumberland Road is the next station. It's just down the foot of Cumberland Road. Where up the hill is the George Darby Hospital. You can't drive down there anymore. But at one time you could drive right down to Cumberland Road Station. And he runs around through the bushes there, around a couple of curves. And we'll get to Stormont Curve here pretty quick. It was quite a little sharp grade, sharp turn, and a fairly good little grade around there. You had to get hold of it coming around there. You'd dump half your passengers. There's Stormont Curve coming up. Just around the curve is Stormont Station. And a whistle board on the white sign on the post there with the SX on it. That S is for station and X is for crossing. You're supposed to blow the whistle when you see that. We're not far out of Sapperton, the end of the line now. We got to go over Caribou Road at Caribou Road Station. You can hardly find the right-of-way through here now. It's all grown up. There's Caribou Road Station. That board with the right-angle sign on it is a stop board. It's facing the motorman now. He has to stop because there's a BC Electric bus line comes down there. The Lockdale bus comes down Caribou Road Hill. From Westminster Depot to Boundary and Hastings it went. Now he winds around the side of the hill, which is still pretty well pushed down there, although on the high side of the hill they are clearing out and putting in new homes. One little station here is called the Golf Club, kind of an interesting thing. I didn't know for years why they called it Golf Club, but in about 1910, the members of the Vancouver Golf Club on Austin Road asked the BC Electric to put the station in, and they used to have a horse and wagon would come and pick the golfers up from golf club station and take them up with the horses and wagon up to the Vancouver Golf Club on Austin Road. Later on, a few years later, they had an old McLaughlin Buick that used to haul them up. Now we can see the car barns at Sapperton around the bend, and that's the end of the line, which at one time the line went right along Columbia Street in front of the penitentiary, right down Columbia, down through town to the depot at 8th Street and Columbia. But when they put the buses in 1937, this is the end of the line. The conductor will go in that little booth and phone the dispatcher and get clearance to head back to Vancouver. In a moment you'll see the motorman get out there out the back door and change the trolley pole. There he is. Well, that's the end of the Burnaby Lake, but it looks like we're going to go right on the Central Park line now. Let's see, oh my goodness, we're down here on Columbia Street, right at 8th and Columbia by the old tram depot. That fancy lamp stand is right in front of the CPR depot. That's the Chilliwack baggage car coming over in the morning. He's going to turn right into the depot, into track 3. Now, there's the Central Park pulling out with the pair of St. Louis, pulling out of track 1. That's the Westminster Trust building in the background. Still looks as good today as it did then. He's right out in the middle of Columbia Street, and then he goes down past the front of the market, over 10th Street. In a moment, we'll get a shot of the car barns in New Westminster there. That's where they built a lot of them. Most of these cars were built in New Westminster, right in those shops. This is a big Coolman car. There was 3 of them bought. You can tell by the round windows. That was a pair of St. Louis there, with the square windows. This is all Stewartson Way now. And this is 14th Street Station, right opposite Alaska Pine. The SkyTrain guideway is right above this spot. We had a stop at 12th Street Junction, 3rd Avenue, 14th Street, 16th Street, 6th Avenue, Meade, and Elsona. And now the SkyTrain leaves Westminster and goes straight to 22nd Street, which is about Elsona, with no stops. Climbing up the hill. This is right alongside of Stewartson Way. Now we've crossed 6th Avenue or Marine Drive, and we're heading to 20th Street, which was Meade Station. Here's a big pair of Coolmans coming down, heading towards New Westminster. There's Elsona. Now we're going around the bend to Connaught Hill Station. Just beyond Connaught Hill now is used to be the old gravel pit, but now it is where the car barns and repair shops for the SkyTrain are. That's Connaught Hill Station right at 10th Avenue. The old spur you see is where they used to get the gravel gons out of the gravel out of the gravel pit. And that big clear space is now where the SkyTrain car barns are. taking up the whole area. Here's the whistle board for Leaside Station, which was Stride Avenue. There's McGregor. And we go around the bend, and all that bush on the right is where Weiserloch is now. All industry there. The next stop is Printer, which is straight down the hill from Burnaby South High School. Now there's all the high school kids there all run down the hill to catch this train, but he's going to fool them. He's not going to stop for them. He's going to go right through there. Look at that meanie doing that. The kids don't know it, but he knows that there's another train following right behind him to take care of the school kids. Now he's coming around the bend to Fraser Arms Station. This is at Gilly Avenue, and this is where the buses met the interurban. That looks like an old pair of thousands. We had 9 of those. Or was there 10? I guess it was 10, because they were all in pairs. The next station is where the old original tram line used to go before they built the cutoff in 1912. If you see straight down through the camera, that pole line and the track, that is the old original Westminster Tramway. It is still used for freight for a couple of blocks. Here he's coming up to Highland Park Station, where the old streetcar was on the old original tram line, and the streetcar used to meet the train here before they put the buses on. Look at the big stump on the right-hand side there. Huge big tree they must have fell. Now we're coming up to McPherson Station. On the left-hand side it was a big cannery where they used to can fruit, vegetables, and they've just completely torn it all down now, and it's all brand new, nice condominiums. Heading towards Royal Oak Station. Now we're crossing Nelson Avenue towards Jubilee Station. Now an interesting fact here that right from this station for the next 4 or 5 stations is all Metro Town. This is where the Jubilee Station is, where Imperial Street crossed the tracks. Now he's leaving Jubilee. Now the next station was Dow Road, which is difficult to find now because of Metrotown. The spur on the right-hand side is the freight spur that used to service the Ford plant, Kelly Douglas. When they put that track in, they had to cut the stations in half so they would see how skinny the station is. They had to make room for the track. That's Dow Road Station. Now you can see West Burnaby is just a half a block away. There was another stop we had to make. Now that is about right where Metrotown Station is on the SkyTrain today. Then we come down to McKay. And this will be Patterson coming up. Now Metrotown goes practically from, well, it goes from McKay to Patterson. Now we're going down through Central Park. Kingsway, you can see the traffic on Kingsway ahead there. Have a good shot of one of the old Pacific Stage buses here in a moment. It's big green. I think it was a Brill, but it was a beautiful bus in those days. There he is. Look at that. He's not afraid of that old interurban. He knows that interurban's going to stop. That's Central Park Station. Now we're going down pretty good grade here. If we can get through Park Avenue without stopping, we can get this thing really rolling. There's a big Valley car coming up, one of the big Chilliwack cars. He goes right by Park Avenue station. Now, this is what we used to call Collingwood East, which is now known as Joyce Station on the SkyTrain. Always got lots of customers from Collingwood East. Notice that this is Collingwood West Station, but look at the woodwork on the top of the stations. They were ornamental, no other reason that anybody can figure out. All the stations at one time had this, like a spire on the top. This is one of the old thousands. We only used these in the rush hour. They were not quite as big and not as powerful as the general run. There's the old powerhouse substation at Earls Road. That old building is still there today. It looks like they're starting to dismantle it, but it's still there. This is Earls Road Station. There's a portable substation out there just behind the station cover. Right here is where 29th Street Station is on the SkyTrain. Next stop is Beaconsfield. That's Slocan Street, but the SkyTrain goes underneath Slocan Street now. This is one continuous grade right from Lakeview Station right up to Collingwood West. It's just a perfect grade all the way. No up or down or anything, just perfect grade. Coming into Nanaimo now. Nanaimo Street goes underneath at this point. And it still does on the SkyTrain. Nanaimo Station. That was Gladstone Trestle. We're just going over there. This Gladstone Station. Just down the bottom of the hill is Lakeview Station, right by Trout Lake. It's coming around the corner now to Victoria Drive, which was a very busy street in those days. And there's a stop board for the interurban. The motorman has to stop at Whistleoff before he crosses Victoria Drive. And then it's a very short distance to Cedar Cottage Station, where he cuts onto the city street, coming into Cedar Cottage. Now he's coming down Commercial Drive towards 12th Avenue, three-car train with a trailer in the center. You'll notice there's no trolley poles on the center car. It's no motors in it. There's the old L6, the old line car, right out going over the Great Northern Cut on Commercial Drive. He's coming down Venable Street now, going to turn on to Clark right by Hammond Furniture. You notice how slow he's going. That's a pretty tight curve there. He has to be pretty careful coming around there. Now he's on Clark Drive heading for Hastings Street. There's the PCC going around the S curve on Hastings Street. And another pair of, looks like a pair of thousands coming around. Yeah. And one of the old steel streetcars following him. Now there's a pair of St. Louis coming down towards Main Street, Main and Hastings. Real busy transfer point, Main and Hastings. The only place on the whole railroad where they could go anywhere in any direction. Now he just crossed Columbia, starting in towards Carroll Street Depot. There, he's crossed over to the opposite main, heading into Carroll Street Depot. Now, wasn't that a nice ride you went on? Well, I'm going to give the mic over to Brother Vic Sharman here because he's going to do a little commentary. My voice is getting a little hoarse. Here's all yours, Vic.
Well, thank you, Frank. Vic Sharman speaking, and I spent a long career in transit. I worked for a little time on the interurbans and then became involved in the planning and scheduling of the system for many years. So what we're going to look at now is the Oak Street car line, which was a one-man car operation from downtown Vancouver at Victory Square, which is where we're showing the picture now, going south on Cambie Street and then ending in Marpole. So as we look at this scene, we see the car heading south on Cambie Street coming down to Robson, and there's another Oak Street car coming towards us. This line was equipped with double-end one-man cars, mostly the Brill type cars, which were quite comfortable in the latter days. The cars had been rebuilt and equipped with leather seats and one-man controls, dead-man operation, and so on, and provided a fairly comfortable but somewhat slow ride. This scene is crossing the old Cambie Bridge, which of course has now been replaced by the new Cambie Bridge or Connaught Bridge. And the cars had to go very slow through the center span as the span swung, and of course the trolley overhead had pans at each end of the span, which required slow negotiating in order not to lose the trolley pole. This scene shows us coming off Cambie Bridge or Connaught Bridge and down towards 6th Avenue, and you might get a glimpse of the City Hall just up in the left, although I think we might have lost it. And this is coming south on Cambie to Broadway. Here's the car approaching Broadway, making preparation to make a right turn to go westbound on Broadway, or shared trackage with the Fairview Beltline. And proceeding west on Broadway, passing Willow Street, I believe, Heather Street, in the vicinity of the Vancouver General Hospital. There's a Fairview Outer Belt car just past us there. And now we're coming up towards Laurel Street, and then very shortly we'll make a left turn onto Oak Street. There's the car approaching Oak Street, turning into Oak, and there's a northbound car just ready to leave Oak to turn east onto Broadway. There's quite a sharp grade between Broadway, which is 9th Avenue, and then 10th Avenue, and we're just crossing 10th Avenue now. To the left was the old King Edward School, which has since been torn down and is now being filled in by buildings of the Vancouver General Hospital. This is the S-turn approaching 16th Avenue, and the line is double track at this point, but will soon go into single track operation. And here we are now on single track, and we're coming into 22nd Avenue, where the first passing track was. Now, this line was not equipped with any sophisticated signaling. In fact, it didn't have any signaling at all. And the single track operation was controlled by what we call staffs, just wooden sticks that had the section inscribed on them where the staff was giving the motorman the right-of-way to travel in that section. So as the motorman approaches the 22nd Avenue siding here, he has to wait for the northbound car to come. And here's the northbound car coming. You see the motorman, or operators, we call the one-man operators, handing the staff across. So now the southbound operator is in possession of the staff, which gives him the right to travel in that single track section up to the next passing siding further up the hill. This scene shows us crossing 25th Avenue, and you can see there's a siding into 25th Avenue or King Edward Avenue. We're now approaching Shaughnessy Hospital, and there weren't many shelters on this line, but you saw there was a shelter there at the hospital, I guess for the benefit of people visiting the hospital, perhaps. And, rather unique for that line. Most of the stops were just in the open, marked by cards or posters on the telephone poles. We're now going up the hill towards 37th Avenue, and to the right now is the Van Dusen Gardens. And of course, at that time, the golf course
Shaughnessy Golf Course
in place there. To the left is the high school, and here's a picture now of the car southbound coming up the hill towards 37th Avenue. And again, we have a meet, and you'll note the operators will exchange staffs and gain possession of the correct staff to allow them to proceed on to the next section. This is a very simple system, and yet it was fairly effective. We're now coming south on Oak Street and approaching 41st Avenue, and of course to the left now is the Oak Ridge Transit Center, and to the right is the Louis Breyer Home and Hospital, but at that time
Shaughnessy Golf Course.
And it's hard to imagine that this intersection is so busy today. When you look back 40 years ago, it was quite quiet. Now there's one of the Fagel buses crossing, and of course those buses were bought in great numbers and became the replacement vehicles for many of the streetcar lines as they were converted from rail to rubber. We're now proceeding south on Oak Street between 41st and 49th Avenue. And to the left there was a gun club, which has since relocated to Lulu Island in Richmond. And this was all very sparsely populated area at the time. Going into another siding, and again there will be the exchange of the staff from the other car. All the equipment we've noted thus far in this film are the J.G. Brill cars. These were built in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and were renovated, however, in the Kitsilano shops in Vancouver. Now proceeding south on Oak on the downgrade towards Marpole, and this would be in the vicinity of about 54th Avenue. And the gentle curve as we come in towards 57th Avenue. I believe this is 57th Avenue, if I remember correctly. The one-man cars, of course, were marked by the X on the front, the two triangle shapes, which indicated to the public that these cars would be entered by the front door. The two-man cars didn't have such markings, and of course passengers entered by the rear doors. These particular cars had double stream front doors and then a single exit treadle door at the other end. And again, a further meet. This is the last meet point before the terminus at Marpole. As I recall, I think the cars ran on about a 10-minute basic headway, during rush hours there would be double heading because they couldn't improve the headways because of the spacing of the passing sidings. So at times in rush hours there'd be two cars running on the same schedule to provide increased capacity. Now the car has left Oak Street and is now on Marine Drive, and in fact I believe at this point has come to the actual terminus in Marpole, and that's verified by the fact that the operator has got out and is now putting up the other trolley pole and removing the other pole to change ends. These cars were double enders with controls in each end, and so the car is now leaving on its return trip to Vancouver. We're going to have a trip on the observation cars, and we see the observation car sitting at the starting point at Cambie and Hastings alongside the Province Building, and a terminus which was shared with the Oak Street cars. The observation cars were rather unique. They were a sort of a toast rack type design, as you can see in the picture, and were a real feature in Vancouver for many, many years. They not only provided a sightseeing trip, but there was also an entertainment feature to the cars. There were two personality conductors who were well known in the city at the time. One was Teddy Lyons, who was actually a real comedian and kept the passengers entertained with his jokes and comedy, and then the other conductor was Dick Gardner. And Dick was an amateur magician, and he could actually do sleight of hand tricks and really confound the passengers with these various tricks. Now the cars made a big loop and ran south on Granville Street, and here we are crossing the bridge. This is the Cambie Bridge, actually, and operated via Granville, 41st Avenue, Dunbar, and Broadway. Incidentally, there was a very old intercity type bus there. It looked like a Fitzjohn bus crossing Cambie Bridge. Here we are. Here's the observation car heading south on Cambie, followed by one of the new Canadian Car Brill trolley coaches, which of course were the vehicles that replaced the majority of the streetcar lines in Vancouver. Also in that last picture was a Pacific Stage Lines twin coach Fageville bus. And this picture shows the Cambie trolley coach operating, so this was taken after that first trolley coach conversion. We're heading west on Broadway now. And here's a scene taken from the seats. The seats were staggered so that people had a good view, a good forward-facing view. That's Dick Gardner acting as conductor on this particular trip. Dick was not only a magician, he was a musician and a comedian, and both he and Teddy Lyons were ideally suited to this type of service. Now the car has gone all the way along West Broadway and is now on Dunbar, coming up the Dunbar Hill around 14th Avenue, the Dunbar diversion, and is going to make a turn onto 16th Avenue, and then will go on Dunbar southbound until it reaches 41st Avenue. On these trips, the conductors had arranged with local people to have their children come out and sing songs and do little dances on the street, and the car would stop, the observation car would stop, and while the children would perform, and it was really old-time homespun entertainment, I guess. Not very sophisticated, but it certainly was well regarded in its day. The car is now heading south on Dunbar. And continuing south on Dunbar. The Dunbar lines were served by two-man cars. Now here's some of the entertainment. We have a little girl playing an accordion. The streetcar approaching is one of the, what were called the Hastings East steel cars. These are built by Canadian Car and Foundry in about 1926. The car in the background is one of the Brill streetcars. We're now turning the corner onto 41st Avenue at Dunbar. And then the car is going to Y at this point. Now the observation car routing was altered during the diminishing years of street railway service, and this was taken later on when the Carrotsdale line was not available for service, but at one time they used to make a big one-way loop. In this case they've run both ways on Dunbar, so my earlier comment on the routing was the one that was in effect prior to the time these pictures were taken. Now we're again heading north on Dunbar. We've come to 16th Avenue, the diversion, and then again we'll head north on Dunbar down towards Broadway. There were two observation cars, number 123 and 124, and then in the early years they were backed up by another car, number 29, which was really a city streetcar that had the top removed from the window railing upwards. And this car helped out in busy times when three cars were needed. However, when the war came along, there was such a demand for ridership on the system that number 29 was put into the Kitsilano shops and rebuilt into a conventional streetcar and served until the end of street railway service and regular passenger service. We've now crossed the Granville Bridge and we're coming up to Pacific and Granville and making the S turn to go north on Granville, north of Pacific. Of course, this is all radically changed now with the new Granville Bridge, and it's hard to identify these scenes and relate them to the present day situation. This is coming up to Davie and Granville. There's one of the PCC cars coming southbound on the Kitsilano line. There were 36 PCC cars on the Vancouver system. The observation car now is just turning off Granville onto Hastings Street, and in this scene is approaching Victory Square, which is the completion of the run, and the passengers are disembarking here. And then the observation car will run deadhead to Prior Barns and then resume another trip at a later time. Again, a Fagel, twin coach Fagel gas bus is showing up there, and of course is indicating the shape of things to come as the system will gradually be converted. And the Fagel gas buses served as an interim measure when the lines were being stripped of trolley overhead and were put in service until the trolley coach overhead could be put in place. So they served on many of the lines on an interim basis. And so the observation car in this case looks to be heading back onto Cambie Street and ready for another trip. We're going to take a trip on the Fairview belt lines. Now, the Fairview belt lines, and this picture is taken at Broadway and Main, and this car has just turned off eastbound Broadway to northbound Main and is coming down to 7th and Main. The belt lines were very old lines and operated via Broadway, Main, Hastings, Granville, Broadway in both directions. And so they were known as the inner and outer belt lines. This scene is on the outer belt line as we're traveling northbound on Main Street down towards First Avenue. They were extremely busy lines, and probably the busiest portion was on the section along Broadway between Main and Granville Street. And of course, in subsequent years, with the revision of the trolley coach or introduction of the trolley coach lines, the Broadway Crosstown line was introduced, which eliminated the transfers that people were required to make at Main Street and at Granville. So both Main and Granville were very busy points on this line. These sections along Main Street and Hastings were not as busy as the portion along Broadway. We're continuing north on Main Street, just passing what was now the Main Street or Science Center station on SkyTrain, and the VIA terminal would be to our right. And coming up to Prior Street, and of course Prior Street has great significance in that this is where prior car barns were, where many of the Vancouver streetcars were housed, and you can see Prior Barns just to the left there. And the old Cobalt Hotel is just to the left. And now today the Greyhound bus lines have a garage and maintenance center on the site of the old Prior car barns. We're coming north on Main Street, overtaking a Pacific Stage Lines intercity bus, and of course the Brill trolley coaches are in evidence. These pictures having been taken during the period when the system was undergoing changeover from streetcars to trolley coaches and buses. A PCC car making an unusual turn at Main and Hastings, having probably come from Prior Barns and going into service on Hastings Street and turning north on Hastings. And as was commented on earlier in the tape by Frank, when he was relating to the Central Park line, the intersection at Main and Hastings was called a Grand Union, and all directions could be made by streetcars and interurbans, the only Grand Union on the system in Vancouver. Main and Hastings was a major point on the system. There were always traffic inspectors at that point regulating the cars, and now we've made a turn onto Hastings coming down towards Columbia. You can see the Carroll Street Interurban Depot and the head offices of the BCER Electric Company just to the left. We have a trolley coach crossing in front of us on Columbia Street, and then again coming to the Interurban Depot at Carroll Street. You can see the neon sign Interurban Train Depot just on the left. Now this is looking the other way from the Interurban Depot east on Hastings Street. Proceeding west on Hastings, we're passing Woodward's, so that hasn't changed. Woodward's is still here, and also the Cenotaph at Victory Square as we're coming up towards Canby Street. Note the safety zones in the street. The streetcars had one disadvantage, of course, and that passengers had to come out into the middle of the street to board, and the boarding areas were marked by safety zones so that automobiles would steer around these and keep passengers protected. We see a mixture on this street of PCC cars, some of the one-man steel cars, which were in different route assignments during the latter days of the street railway operation. The PCC cars originally were assigned to the Victoria and the Joyce lines and operated on those as well as the Kitsilano line exclusively. But in the latter days they were assigned to the Hastings East and the Grandview lines after those earlier routes had been converted. So we're now on Hastings Street at Granville, and now see one of the Fairview cars turning from Hastings to southbound Granville, and followed by
PCC car 14 Hastings.
This now, of course, is a transit mall. The Granville Mall extends from Hastings right through to Nelson Street and is dedicated to transit vehicles only. You'll note this is Dunsmuir Street, and note all the storefront in evidence. Of course, this is now the Pacific Mall, and there are very few storefronts in place. This is Georgia Street with Hudson's Bay store in the background. And coming to Robson Street. There seems to be a gap in the streetcar service at this point, which was rather unusual because the transit ridership was very high on the system just after the war, or particularly during the war, and most lines had very close headways. I might comment on some of the cars we're seeing. That streetcar coming towards us is one of the Narragansett types, which were built by the BC Electric in their New Westminster shops. And were remodeled. They formerly had a deck roof, and you'll see this car has an arched roof, and these cars were quite radically rebuilt and equipped with leather seats and done very attractively because the system was in need of renovation, and prior to the war there was an extensive program of rebuilding of the old cars. Really no improvement in the technology of the cars, but a matter of providing new bodies and more comfortable seats and more attractive lighting, etc., which carried the system through the war years and into the post-war period, at which time the decision was made to abandon the rail system and convert to trolley coach and buses. Now coming on to Granville Bridge, the old Granville Bridge at Pacific and Granville, and heading southbound on the bridge, and shortly we'll go through the swing span. And already the trolley coaches are sharing the overhead with the streetcars on Granville Bridge. Minimal traffic on the bridge, but cars, of course, were not in the numbers that they are today, and transit was still the major way to get around the city, and of course still is in many instances, but car ownership wasn't nearly what it is today. We're keeping pace with some of the Brill trolleys. You note the BC Electric insignia on the trolley coaches, because this was still in the period of BC Electric. Approaching 4th Avenue and Granville at the south end of the bridge. And then going south from 4th Avenue up the hill to Broadway. Now we're still on the outer belt line, of course. You'll note on the old cars they had very large number boxes on the front, and the numbers were very easy to distinguish. And in comparison, when you look at the trolley coaches that we've seen in the picture, the numbers were much smaller because of the design of the vehicles, and it wasn't as easy to identify the number, the route number of the vehicle as it was in the old streetcar days. Rounding the curve from southbound Granville to eastbound Broadway. And this was a timing point on the line. Sometimes the cars would sit here for 1 or 2 minutes, making up their departure time. And now heading east towards the next transfer point, which will be Oak Street. Passing a Fairview Inner. one of the Narragansett rebuilt cars on the Fairview Inner. And here's our Fairview Outer coming along. Again, this is one of the rebuilt Narragansett cars with the bulging sides, which was characteristic of that particular group of cars. Hard to imagine that this is Broadway when one sees the volume of traffic on that street today. As I make this commentary, of course, it's August of 1990. These pictures were taken probably in the early 1950s, so we're looking back about at least 40 years. Oak Street. Fairview Inner. This was one of the Brill cars that came towards us, and they too were rebuilt and modernized. And this is a Brill car pictured here. It looks as though it's just come out of the shops. There was a regular repainting program, and it was easy to identify the cars that had come out of the shop. They would come out glistening and stay that way for a few months, and then gradually get rather grimy looking until they were again put in the paint shop. All that type of work was done at the Kitsilano shops at the south end of Burrard Bridge. I think that particular car is 391, but I can't tell for sure. Now we've passed Canby Street and are heading east along Broadway, past Columbia and Manitoba Streets, etc., up the grade towards Main Street. You note the rather poor condition of the street. A lot of the pavement in between the car tracks was rather poor, where it had been uprooted for repairing of the tracks, and in many cases there were wooden blocks or concrete blocks or bricks between the tracks, and made for rather rough operation of automobiles. Coming up towards Main Street, you can see the Lee Building, which is still at Broadway and Main. And there seems to be a lot of track repair work, judging by the patches in the pavement on either side of the rails. And approaching Broadway and Main. Now this picture of course shows a trolley coach on Broadway, so that is a complete circuit now on the Fairview Outer Beltline.
This is Frank Horne again, and I'm going to take you back to the Fraser Valley line. This again is over about 40 years since the film was made, and the commentary is being done in 1990. Now that's a typical consist of a Chilliwack line with a baggage car, express car on the head end, and one or two coaches behind. Here's a picture of Vic Sharman and his wife and family, and they're going to take the last trip. They're at Liverpool Road Station, which is right at Scott Road, where Scott Road crosses the Fraser Valley line now. And there's a sign there. We'll show you a close-up of it in a second, stating that the last trip on the Chilliwack line and the passenger service October 1st. It's sure nice to have Vic right here with us because he's filling us in on a lot of stuff here that we didn't all know about. Pretty soon there's the train, all the last trip going up to Langley, and or the last trip to Chilliwack, and they meet at Langley, all decorated up for their ceremonies for the last trip. This is taken at Langley now. You'll see the train pulling into Langley for the ceremonies. He looks like he's coming from Chilliwack.
Yes.
He has
comment on there. The two trains met at Langley, and then there was a ceremony with the officials and so on. The two trains touched noses, and I was there at the time. It was rather a sad occasion, I thought.
Yeah, well, I'm going to give the mic to Vic here just for a second while this ceremonies are on. He'll be able to explain it to you better.
Here's the train coming from Vancouver to the Langley station, headed by one of the Connaught cars, the 1309, 10, 11 series, and of course decorated up in the Ready Kilowatt. The two trains have now touched noses, and in that last picture, although we can't really see them, is Mr. Grauer, who was president of BC Electric at the time, and Ivor Neal, who had been appointed general manager of transportation. And so that was the closing ceremony. Now I think the picture is going to take us back to the Carroll Street station, where the baggage section would leave early in the morning, a few minutes ahead of the passenger section, to allow for the loading of mail and express at New Westminster. And then the passenger section, which is shown leaving now, would meet that section at New Westminster, where they would couple up and then run together as a single train through to Chilliwack. Well, Frank, you're the interurban motorman, so I think you should take over now and tell us where we're going.
Well, thank you, Vic. It's very interesting to know you were at those last ceremonies. There's one of the Coolmans coming out with the round windows. We always said they look like an owl coming at you. They were a nice, comfortable car, though. Here's the baggage express car that's half an hour ahead of the passenger coach coming down Commercial Drive, about 6th Avenue, just about to cross over the bridge at the Great Northern Cut, or which is the Burlington Northern now. There's the bridge with one of the Grandview streetcars crossing the Great Northern Bridge. Here comes the passenger section of the Chilliwack. He just highballs right through. He doesn't make any stops till he gets to New Westminster, and then he couples up with the baggage car. For many, many years they run 2- and 3-car trains, sometimes 4, but laterally the passenger travel was cut down, and they were only traveling with the express car and the one coach like they are on this scene. That's the Gladstone trestle. Coming into Nanaimo Road Station here, and that's Nanaimo Station on the SkyTrain now. That's the passenger section of the Chilliwack. Yeah, here's the baggage car coming down onto Columbia Street, going to head into Track 3 at New Westminster Depot. That building now is the Value Village. If you go in that building, you can still see the posts going through on the angle which divided the 3 tracks. Here comes the passenger section. Here's a scene that you don't see too often. This is Friday morning market special coming in from Mount Lehman. He's pulling into Track 2. That'll be the Central Park on track 1, the Market Special on track 2, and the number 2 on the Chilliwack ready to leave. He's been loading the mail and baggage express, just about ready to go. Now there's the parking ramp is right behind that depot now, but this is many years ago. There he goes. We're on our way to Chilliwack. Comes out and runs down Front Street. There we got all them tracks. He's on the BC Electric track is the first one, then the CPR, then the CNR, and then the Great Northern tracks. All in the side by side there. Now he's heading up the ramp towards the bridge. Quite a steep little incline. Yeah, we're right up on the Fraser River Bridge. Now this is shared by the Canadian National Railroad, the Great Northern Railroad, which is now Burlington Northern, and also the used to be the BC Electric, changed to BC Hydro, and now it's called Fraser Valley and Southern, if I'm not mistaken. Is that hit you right there, Vic?
Yeah, the locomotives have Southern British Columbia on them, but I'm not sure what the full name of the new railroad is. It was acquired from BC Hydro.
Yeah, the BC Hydro did sell it to some, it is a U.S. outfit that owns it now. There's the baggage car coming on the south end of the Fraser River Bridge. You'll notice the trestle goes into 3. BC Electric went straight ahead, the Great Northern went to the right, and the other one to the left, the CN. Now he's coming off the ramp, heading towards Liverpool Road Station, where we saw Vic and his wife getting on. That's the station just in the distance there. That was also known as shops because it apparently, when they first put the Chilliwack line in, they were going to put huge railroad shops there, but they never did materialize. Here we're coming around the bend to Old Yale Road, which is South Westminster Station. This is where the freight starts to grind when he's pulling the heavy train up here. That's quite a pull. It's about 3% grade up here. Yeah, we've gone past a Jorth Road station. We're heading towards Scott Road station. He crosses Scott Road twice within a mile or so here. This is the first crossing of Scott Road, and then he just dips into the municipality of Delta, North Delta, out of Surrey, just for a very short distance. As he goes around the bend, he's climbing up there, and he goes past 96th Avenue, crosses Scott Road for the second time, and comes to Kennedy Station. There's a big siding at Kennedy Station where the freight, if you had too many tons, you had to take the first cut up and put it in the siding and run back and get the tail end of the train and bring it up. Kennedy siding was at the top of the hill. It's very populated there now.
Frank, I note the viewers may notice that the trolley pole arrangement on the trains, this train is different to what was on the Central Park line. You notice that the front trolley pole on the baggage car was pulled down, and the pole on the rear car was up. I gathered there was a reason for that in case the pole broke on the front car or the back car, at least it would fall onto the right-of-way. Do you remember that as being the reason for that pole configuration?
Yeah, apparently that if the pole did come loose, it would go right down the aisle of the coach, so they've always run with the back car. Well, we're traveling right along here. We're down at Sullivan Station now. We've crossed the King George Highway, and this is Sullivan he's coming into. The film eliminates several Hunt Road, Craig's, and Newton stations. Now we're coming across, this is the Serpentine River, and this is where we crosses Highway 10 at McClellan Station. Now he's coming towards Cloverdale. That is the old Highway 99, Cloverdale Station. You'll get a glimpse of the old old substation here, which has just recently been torn down, or knocked down. It was all solid concrete. There's the station, the depot. That's the grain elevator, and in the distance is the substation, that square roofed building. That with the ivy all over it, I don't know if there was just a short glimpse. Now we're on our way. We're heading for Hall's Prairie, which was a meeting point for the trains, siding, and also a station. He's moving right along here. You can see by the way the cameraman's bouncing there. That's Hall's Prairie Station. Just around the bend is the siding, Hall's Prairie siding. Now their brakeman's out there getting switched, taking the hole there. Here comes the baggage cart. All lined up. He's on his way. That was the most common setup, 2 coaches on the back with a baggage car on the head end. That was number 2 left in the morning. Oh, he's leaving Hall's Prairie. He's getting by Hunter and Anderson. This will be Anderson Station. Now, just about Hunter is where the new bypass cuts off. The main line doesn't go through Langley Prairie anymore. Turns off and bypasses Langley about Hunter Station. That's Hunter coming up there. It veers off to the left of the main line now. There's Langley Station. He's coming into Langley. Now this is the blue mail truck there. He's picking the mail up off the baggage car, and the traffic there was that was the old Yale Road or Trans-Canada Highway at that time. These are just shots around Langley, taken of all the newer buildings and to show what it looked like in those days, which it was a growing town, Langley. There's the Brackman Kerr building. The railroad went right alongside of it. There's some more stores. Pretty modern little town for around the late 40s, early 50s. That's a Trans-Canada Highway. There's the schedule board on the side of the station, let you know what the time the trains are due in both directions. There he goes. He's leaving Langley. Right by the Brackman Kerr, and he's going by Norris. Now, this is where the bypass, the new railroad, cuts back in, and it goes right along the side of Highway 10. This is Milliner Station. It's all pretty well perfectly flat right here, and he could get it rolling real good. Now, these pictures are obviously taken from an automobile going on Highway 10, right parallel to the track. Right now, this part of the track is shared by the CN, CP, and the Fraser Valley line for the coal trains. They cut off at a Harmsworth station, which is just a couple of stations up the line here. We come to Jardine first. Jardine is where the road cuts off to go to Fort Langley. There he's around on the bend. There's Jardine Station. And right just about here, it must be where the freeway goes underneath the line. Now he's starting to climb a wee bit here. Not too bad yet. That he's coming around to Harmsworth, and at Harmsworth Station is where the coal line cuts off and goes over to the CN. That's Harmsworth there. Now we're starting up Sperling Hill. It's a that's quite a long hill. It's quite a pull for the freight train, but this is Sperling Station he's coming into here, and I don't know the name of that crossing there, but it just around the bend is Sperling, and he's on the top of the hill now. That's the whistle board for Sperling. And he went whistling right by Sperling there, and he's coming to Warhope next. Yep, there's the whistle board. There, he's slowing down to pick that lady up at Warhope. The next station is kind of a little bit of a landmark. They're apparently leaving the old substation there at Coghlan. And you'll notice the milk stand where the one of the many milk stands all along the line when they had the milk train on. And at Coghlan Station, there's the substation. Right across the track, there's the milk stand right by the station. You'll see them pick up their milk cans in a sec, or deposit some more. Yeah, he's depositing some more empty cans so that the farmer can fill them up and be ready for the milk train in the morning. There he goes. The next station is County Line, one of the few overpasses where the road goes over the track. And the fellow that was taking the film here was standing obviously up on top of the overpass looking down. That's County Line Station there. And he reverses to the other side of the bridge to catch going the other way. Now we get to Beaver River. Now Beaver River was mostly for a siding for the freight, but the passengers could alight. And if you look sharply just between the siding track and the main line, you'll see some ties spread out there. That was so that the passengers didn't have such a high step to get down. There's the milk stand. Here's the siding for Beaver River. You notice them ties in the middle of the track? That was the station platform. That little building on the side is just a phone booth. That wasn't a depot. That's by Jackman. He's heading for Lombard. There's Lombard Station. Now, Rand State is omitted, but that's Bradner up ahead. That's the general store, that white building, and that's Bradner Station. There's a siding there. Quite often the freight would pull in there to eat. It was dinner time by the time you got to Bradner. Now we're heading towards Denison. There was also a siding at Denison, just past the station. Now we're on our way to Mount Lehman. He drifts into Mount Lehman pretty quick. It's where she drops over and starts down the Mount Lehman hill. It's around this bend, and then be at Mount Lehman Station. When I was breaking in as a motorman here, I was with a motorman called Al Powys, and a horse got on the track, two of them. I had to chase them halfway down Mount Lehman Hill, and Al was really worried I was going to scare him and chase them onto a trestle. And apparently if they get on the trestle, they fall through. This is a steep hill down here, and it winds around down Mount Lehman. The horses run down the side off the track anyway. Yeah, I saw the milk stand there that we just passed. I don't know if we get a shot of that. Oh, no, we didn't miss that little trestle where the horses went down the ravine. This is coming right out onto Matsqui Prairie now. That's Gifford Station. Wow, we went by there in a hurry, didn't we? Now, there's Glover we're going by, and that way in the distance is Claiborne. Now, this is where we cross the CPR track, and the brakeman's got to get out and go and lock himself in this little room by throwing them levers. And if he doesn't throw them right, he can't get out. I'll show you where the little house is in a second. That's Mount Lehman Station, and right in the foreground there is the little house where the signal. And the brakeman, when he goes in, he throws these four big levers, and it puts the oh, you notice the mail dropping off there for the mail truck. Oh boy, he's gone already. You'll notice the signal go down there. Now that's stopped for the CPR. And then there's a time clock there, and then he pulls the last signal and gets the permission for us to cross. Then they have to stop on the other side, and the brakeman has to reverse all four levers, and then he can get out, open the door. The first lever puts a bolt right through the bottom of the door, and you can't open it. We're going to do a little high-speed traveling here now from Claiborne to past Mount Nicholas. Yeah, I said Mount Nicholas. I don't know. It was St. Nicholas, a little station, very seldom used, but it was, both stations were a long ways apart here from Claiborne to Abbotsford. And this is a picture obviously shot from the back end of the automobile on the highway from Abbotsford to Mission. Yeah, we got on the Chilliwack line, the motormen used to pack their own whistles, and they were a high-pitched one, quite a bit different than the muffled ones they used to use in town. They were so shrill that the people that built the houses right next to the track used to complain about the noise, so they were all muffled ones in town. But the Chilliwack motormen were allowed to put the three-tone shrill whistle on, which sounded way more like a train. Here he's pulling into Abbotsford. You'll notice that truck is waiting there for the mail. Boy, they just throw it in and away he's gone. That's when the Royal Mail used to move. fast. Now we're getting you a few shots of Abbotsford. What Abbotsford used to look like in the late 40s, early 50s. There's a sign there. It says Vancouver 42 miles and Chilliwack about, I think, 25, it said. Oh, you're more than halfway. Just more shots of Abbotsford. Clean little town. There's a BA gas station. Now this one, we're kind of at sea here. We don't know where that, but I assume that is where the CPR runs through Abbotsford because it's only a few hundred feet over from our main line as the CP main line. So I imagine that is a steam engine at Abbotsford. Well, we're on our way out of Abbotsford towards, we just went under the Trans-Canada Highway, and we'll go by Delaire Station. There's Delaire. And the next one is Vi Road. And when we get to Vi, we're very close to the interchange at Huntington. That was a big interchange that the BC Electric used to bring all the bananas down from the Northern Pacific Railway and also the Milwaukee. It's a switch, this is Vi Station. There's a little switch on the right-hand side, and we used to drop the whole train by, put the engine in there, that whole train, and run into the hole there. A little farther on, you'll notice one of the 940s, one of the brand new diesels that they bought around about 1948, sitting in there. That was the start of the beginning of the end of the trolley wire. Here he's coming around the bend, crossing the highway that goes from Abbotsford to Sumas. And that's the depot at Huntington. There was a man and his wife usually there all the time in that house, and it was also the depot. And they went out the back door. They were in the United States. It was almost right on the border there. Now we're missing a whole bunch of stations here. There's Watcom Road, there's South Sumas, there's Arnold, there's Norton, and we arrive now at the powerhouse at Vetter Mountain. And there's a station, Vetter Mountain Station, just around the corner. And just as we leave here, there's a couple of deer on the track there, and they don't know which way to go. We'll catch, there they go, look at them. They're nice looking little deer, little whitetails. Oh, we didn't get them. They got off the track in time. And we go around, we're going past Reclaim. You notice all that grass down there was 30 feet of water before they drained Lake Sumas. And there's Reclaim and Kidd, but the next station we'll see will be Belrose. That's the siding down to Kidd. Pardon me, down to Reclaim. I was sitting in the siding with a motorman on a freight train one time when I was a young feller, and I said, why did they cut all these cuts and rock cuts all around the mountain when they could have built the railroad right down there on the flat? And he looked at me and said, kid, when I was your age, there was 30 feet of water. We'd get out and have a swim there. It was old Howard Mortison. Very dry humor, but here's Belrose. And that's Ken Hodgson's car parked there. He's up in the bushes taking the picture. There you can see the farmlands in the distance. It's all flat. It must have been a very shallow lake, but it was huge. Yeah, we go by a couple more stations here. Sinclair, There's siding at Sinclair. And Stewart Station's right in here. And we're just about the end of the Vedder Mountain. We'll come out to Yarrow and very shortly. There was quite a community at Yarrow. Yeah, that looks like some of the buildings at Yarrow. I was a brakeman on 3 and 8 and used to leave Vancouver about 5:30 at night. And when we got to Yarrow, I always felt I was getting close to the end of the line. It seemed to take forever to get up there, and all dark. Now we're leaving Yarrow, and there's quite a fill across here. And it gets to the Vedder Canal, where we have a steel truss bridge going across the Vedder Canal. The reason they call it the Vedder Canal, because I think the Vedder River used to run into Sumas Lake and then out into the Fraser. So when they drained Sumas Lake, they had to dike the Vedder. And then they called it the Vedder Canal, because the Vedder River is higher than the land right here. You notice we're on a fill all the way through here. This is a very little used station. It was Vedder River. A few fishermen used to get off there. There's the steel truss trestle. We're looking back now towards New Westminster, and you see the Vedder Mountain in the distance behind. As soon as we get over this bridge here, it won't be long, we'll be at Woodruff. Used to be a logging road cross here at Woodruff. It was very, very busy. I guess, imagine it crossed here and went over to the CN line. All I remember, it was abandoned, but I remember the diamond and the tracks were still there. Well, looks like we're getting by Lickman. And there's Lickman, there's South Sumas, and there's Evans Station along here. After we leave Evans, we'll be coming into Sardis. There's a trestle just before Sardis. You'll see the traffic going across that road. It's going up to Cultus Lake. Here again is the mailman with a truck waiting there. Now it's perfectly straight, perfectly flat. You go past Knight Road, station at Knight Road. Then the next thing you come to is the diamond for the CN signal tower. There's the distance signal for the diamond. That's the interchange for the CN. That's the home signal, and there's the signal tower. And there's the CN main line. Now we're coming into the loop, in the Chilliwack depot. Notice the cows, they're feeding there in the middle of the loop there. Peaceful sitting. They don't even look at the train. Couldn't care less. There again is the mail truck. Away goes Her Majesty's mail to be delivered on time. Now we're going to have a lot of shots around Chilliwack. I'm not too familiar with the downtown. Are you, Vic? It's just shots of the downtown Chilliwack.
Yes, well, it shows Chilliwack is a very quiet area, and I must say, Frank, in looking at this footage, it's brought back a lot of memories. I assisted Ken Hodgeson in taking these films by driving the car for him, and so we had a lot of fun in making this film. So it's been rather enjoyable thinking back to those days. A lot of time and effort went into it, as you can imagine, to catch the various scenes along the way. Your comments are interesting, Frank. You know the line intimately, and it's been very interesting.
Well, thanks, Vic. Pretty soon we're going to start heading back, and they're just random shots, and there's nowhere a way to identify them unless we see stations or road crossings. But it gets to be redundant to have a commentary all the way back, because it would be the same as coming up, even if we could trace them. There's sort of some nice cars. I'd sure like to have one of them today in that shape. I worked 3 and 8 for a while, and he used to the brakeman had to sleep up in Chilliwack. The conductor lived in Chilliwack, and the brakeman had to sleep in a bunkhouse up above the car barn. And you leave Chilliwack at 8 in the morning and get back into Vancouver about 10:30, 11 o'clock. I worked it for about 3 months, 7 days a week. Made good money on it, but you sure didn't see much of your family in that 3 months. We're heading back out of the loop now. It's a complete loop around Chilliwack in those days. You didn't have to change ends or anything. There's the CN Tower on the way back. Some beautiful country, beautiful scenes here. It sure brings back a lot of memories for me, too. Notice the poles there. They've and the new right-of-way. They've got all that new ballast all down there and spread out nice and even. And most of the line had poles on both sides with the trolley to hold it up. But every once in a while they'd put them steel arms out, which I guess were a lot more efficient and a lot less expensive than having a double pole line all the way, too. Those poles weren't just to hold the trolley wire up. They were also a high-tension line. Had to be extremely careful.
Frank, I guess you'll notice that the consist in that train is a Niles-built baggage car, as opposed to the American car company built car that came up on the train from Vancouver. And these were arched roof cars and matched the arched roof of the Connaught passenger car behind. So quite a different consist on the return trip.
Yeah, I noticed when I used to be a motorman on there, we used to like to get the 1700. It was I think it was a Ottawa car. Can anybody correct me on that? American car. Yeah, American car company, right, yeah. And it was so much better built and everything, and I didn't know until recently that it was in a head-on collision with one of the 970 freight engines at Cloverdale. And it was set behind Kitsilano Barn as a wreck for several years, and they rebuilt it. And I know whenever I motored it, I thought, gee, this is a nice car in good shape, but I didn't realize it had been rebuilt, whereas the Niles cars were getting pretty rickety. They were identical motors and everything in them, though, controllers. And number 2 was the one that went up in the morning and come back as number 5. Then they had 4 and 7. 4 used to leave about 2 in the afternoon and get back about 9 o'clock into Westminster. And then the Central Park fellows would take the number 4 back from Westminster to Vancouver. And then 3 and 8 was 3 used to come down in the morning at 8 o'clock, and it was number 8 going back up around about 5:30. It left Vancouver. Yeah, there's what Front Street used to look like. Them boxcars are on the Great Northern track and the Great Northern interchange, waiting for the BC Electric to pick them up. Or the BC Electric have left them there for the Great Northern to pick up. As the tracks go over, there's the Great Northern, the CN, the CP, and the BC Electric. There he's going into the back of the Value Village there. He's coming up. Another interesting thing here, when the freight train went through that 1-point switch, it was a city switch, and you used to have to put a great big track nut in there, throw the switch and put the track nut in so that the switch couldn't flop over when all the boxcars were going over it. And then the tail end brakeman, he sometimes had a hard time getting that nut out of there because it would get wedged in, and he'd have to jab at it a couple of times with a switch iron and pick it up and then run after the caboose to get on. Here's the sad part. The old, this is the L4. They had a couple of these, the L6 and the L4, but they're taking the wire down, picking it all up. Story I heard, I don't know how true it is or not, but they had several huge rolls of this copper trolley wire by the track, and they went to pick it up in the morning and it was all gone. Somebody come along in a truck in the middle of the night, and very valuable commodity, that copper. They got it down a lot quicker than they put it up, I'll bet. One thing watching this film, I can't see how that trolleyman can keep that trolley on the wire. The wire is so slack, but yet that trolley seems to stay right on there. See, they cut all the guys, and gets them great big cutters, and he snips them right off, and then the trolley wire drops loose. But they obviously know what they're doing. I was a motorman, not a lineman. This is a sad scene, but wait a few more minutes, you'll see the saddest one. Now, there's one of the Niles baggage cars, been all stripped of all the metal inside, and the brass, so it's all taken out of it. And they got a couple of cables on her. She's pretty rickety, too, now. She won't give up, though. There, she's going to go to sleep now. See all the streetcars along them behind there. This is taken at Kitsilano Barns, where they scrapped all the cars and burnt them. And there's a string of streetcars there all ready for the same fate. Now they've torched it now. Away she goes. That shot of the line car taking the wire down was sad, but this is the saddest one to me. Of course, my father was a retired BC Electric motorman on the Marpole-Steveston line, and I was on there for a while. My brother-in-law retired from the BC Electric. He was a dispatcher. So it's kind of in the family.
Likewise. My father was also on the transit side, not on the interurbans, Frank, but on the city streetcar lines as a motorman and an instructor and a supervisor, etc. So I guess it runs in the family and it's in the blood, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah. But this film is just, I just can't believe that somebody's had this so long and I hadn't seen it. There's not much left. Or I guess that wood was so dry, it would be, this would be about, I guess it'd be about 40 years old, I guess. They were built around approximately 1910, and this would be about 1950 or... They would have all had to been rebuilt, and then they were actually obsolete because there were so many faster and lighter cars. So it had been very, very expensive to rebuild them or buy brand new ones at that time. Things are getting pretty hot around there by the look of that fire hose. It's right below Burrard Bridge. There's one of the old wooden freight motors by the looks over there. He's probably ready for the burn too, for the torch.
I think it was actually a snow sweeper, Frank. That freight motor, you thought that was a snow sweeper, you know, that had the bamboo brushes and was used to clear the tracks. Anyway, I guess this is the end of the line totally for the Fraser Valley line and the equipment, and the most interesting amount of film depicting quite an interesting era in the local transportation scene.
And now we jump to 1998, the Downtown Historic Railway, and here's Vic Sharman, one of our instructors, having some fun with some ladies in period costumes that were invited from the city. And here's Interurban Car 1207, driven by Don Bellamy, being pulled out for the first time at the official opening. This is at Moberly and 6th Avenue, also known as Leg and Boot Station. Nice, lovely, sunny day on this opening. Here we are looking westbound, the car coming back to Leg and Boot Station. And there off in the distance is the car coming from Granville Island back to Leg and Boot. It's called Leg and Boot Station because back at the turn of the century, the police found an actual leg in a boot, which is one of Vancouver's many unsolved murder mysteries. Car 1207 here was strictly on display in 1997. There was no wire. And here in 1998, we operated from Moberly and 6, which we are standing at, looking west to Granville Island. Car 1207 was built in New Westminster in 1905. Here we have Frank Horne, one of our other instructors. He's just put that pole up and he's pulled this one down. Now the car is ready to go back to Granville Island for another trip. You can see the car here another angle of it. Pole is up at the back and down at the front, ready to go back. And here we have the inside of the car. A lot of people on this trip. Number of passengers. Car very well done up. And here we are off to Granville Island with the flag people holding back the traffic. This particular line of track was previously owned by the Canadian Pacific Railway, CPR, and was leased to the BC Electric Railway. There was never any passenger service ever operated on this Falls Creek track, since it only ran to Yukon Street. East of Yukon was the Great Northern Railway. And here we are panning over to Frank Horne. And as you notice, he is standing, which is normally the way that the motormen were in the city. They ended up standing while driving. Better view of any obstructions and people running in front of the cars. And here we are slowing down because there's a break in the wall, and back on our way to Granville Island. BC Electric Railway serviced these industries with electric freight locomotives. Slowing down here to say hi to someone, and then we'll be on our way back westbound towards Granville Island. From Granville Island to Yukon, a 2-kilometer track was bought by the City of Vancouver from the Canadian Pacific Railway for $9 million. And from Yukon to Main Street, which is another 1 kilometer, was bought for $600,000. Frank Horne that you see here driving, and Vic Sharman that you've already seen at the beginning, and Don Bellamy were our 3 instructors from the very beginning. All 3 of them have experience driving these interurbans before they were retired in the 1950s. And we're pulling into Granville Island, and it looks like Frank is making a nice smooth stop. And as you can see, we end up staying here for a little bit in order to, and we unload from the back and reload from the front, as you see from here. Another view from inside, and on our way back to Morbely and 6th Avenue, Leg and Boot Station. Leg and Boot Station is now the halfway point because of the extension that has occurred to Ontario and 1st Avenue, and last year in 2001 extension to Quebec Street. And we see off in the distance the interurban coming back into Granville Island Station. This was termed a double-ended car because you had the 2 poles. So you notice the pole is up at the rear, and so when you pull in here, you would end up putting the pole up at the front, which would then end up being the rear, and then switching over to the other end and pulling that pole down. And it looks like Frank is teaching Angus McIntyre, another one of our members. As you can see, we disembark now from the rear of the coach. The conductor will quickly jump on, shut the doors, move to the front, and load up. And here we see Frank doing some instruction and showing some of the passengers what we had to do. Now you see the pole is up at the rear, pulled at the front, and ready to head back. And there is Angus McIntyre. He's our treasurer, and there's Frank Horne. Frank drove for the BC Electric from 1946 to 1951 on the Burnaby Lake, Central Park, and Chilliwack lines, and then worked from 1951 until 1985 for the Great Northern Railway. We are now proceeding from Granville Island here, heading east towards Leg and Boot Station. Like I said before, 1207 was on display only in 1997. It operated from Granville Island to Moberly and 6, Leg and Boot Station in 1998. An extension to Ontario and First Avenue was in 1999 when car 1231 joined the fleet. And then eventually an extension to Quebec Street in 2001. This is a nice straight track, as you can see, and so it was an opportunity for all of us to open it up. And there is Angus with Frank, and opening the speed up in notches. And then shutting it right back and just letting it roll. And as we approach Moberly and 6, we will have to slow down and wait for the flag people to give us permission to come through after they have stopped the traffic. And here we go. This is Angus McIntyre driving, so we'll see if he can make a nice easy stop. And yes, he does. There's 1207 heading back, flag people running up to stop the traffic, allowing it to head back to Granville Island. And there's Dale Laird, superintendent. Today he was a flag person. And here we are in 2001. We're looking east, and we have car 1231 approaching the passing track. Car 1231 is a St. Louis car built in 1912. and it'll sit on the passing track, waiting for interurban car 1207 coming from Granville Island to pass on the northern track, and here it comes. There it goes towards Ontario and First Avenue, and eventually Quebec Street. At this time, I'd like to thank Vic Sharman and the late Ken Hodgeson for making the original footage. Thanks also to Vic Sharman and Frank Horne for their commentary, which was added in 1990, 40 years after the original footage was taken. Here we see car approaching, coming up the 3% grade, car 1207, coming back from Quebec Street. And there it goes. Thanks to BC Transit for restoring interurban car 1207, that we see taken off going towards Granville Island. Thanks to Mayor Philip Horne of Vancouver and City Councillors for their support and continued financial support of the Downtown Historic Railway. Thanks also to former Vancouver Councillors Don Bellamy, Vic Sharman and Frank Horne for being at the Downtown Historic Railway nearly every weekend over the past 4 years, training all of us volunteers. Thanks also to Jesse Jehudi of AAA Movies for helping produce this video. Here we see the car coming down at 3% grade, coming down quite quickly. Car 1231, and there it goes. Vic Sharman and his wife in front of car 1231. And there's car 1231 again. The Downtown Historic Railway, see you later, would not be around without the vision of Dale Laird, our superintendent. So come on down and ride. We run from May to October, and Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. There's Don Bellamy. See you later, Don. See you next year. So come on down and ride with us. My name is David Aslan, and I'm the president of the Transit Museum Society, and it was nice having you along for the ride today.